Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, April the 2nd, 2025, and today we're going to talk about what the pros wear in the garden and get a celery breakdown from seed to harvest. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Wednesday, everyone. I got to say, now that Mike is here helping with the show and doing a wonderful job, I might add, I have time. It's a wild experience to go from basically not having a morning part of the workday at all to having one. I got some spinach harvested yesterday and some sweet potatoes for an order that we have coming up, which was a nice feeling to be able to do that in the morning, starting to get back into the growing and then selling part of the season. While I was at it with the sweet potatoes, I got my sweet potato slips started. Basically, I layer them in a tote and cover them with a rough compost or soil mix. Sand works too. I've already talked about sweet potatoes here and how I've kind of changed our slip program, and I will talk more on that later when I go to plant them. But basically, I just need them to sprout. I'm not as worried about sprouting out roots as much as I used to be. I may not even really need the mulch layer anymore, but for this new system of slips that I'm using, which I talked about in that episode, but old habits die hard, I suppose. Yesterday, I also took care of a burn pile that I had accumulated over the winter. I do about one small burn pile a year in the same place that I later plant to a little bit of flowers every summer, usually some sorghum and some other stuff mixed in there. And the thing is with burn piles that they can be weirdly time consuming, not just because they, you kind of have to keep an eye on them to make sure they don't turn into like burn everythings, but also because I catch myself just standing there staring at the flames, mesmerized. There's just something about fire. Love it. But that's not always the most productive thing to do in the world. But all that to say, I'm very thankful for Mike's help. Doing this whole thing by myself has been an enormous, and if I'm being honest, not very sustainable job. And I'm very thankful for all of you Patreon members who support us, who make it possible for me to hire on the help. So you rock. Thank you. So in celebration of that, makes sense, I guess, today is Celery Day. Celebration. Yeah. Celery is one of those crops that you could easily be like, why would I grow a bunch of water sticks? But here's the thing, and this is going to come as a surprise to those of you who are physically watching this, but you haven't lived until you have tried farm fresh celery. I would not have considered bothering with growing celery before I tasted fresh, legit celery. It was that necessary addition to mirepoix, or sometimes it could be used to justify eating an entire ramekin of ranch dressing with the help of, like, I don't know, some carrots and red peppers or something. And let's be real, celery and peanut butter is pretty solid. But celery never gets the star credit of other vegetables and other foods. And a large part of that is people have simply never tried farm fresh celery. It is not the same thing. Now, I should say this is not the most popular market garden crop, if only because celery, in all of its deliciousness, is slower than Christmas. But increasingly, growers are finding ways to fit it into their production as demand grows, as customers and cooks are increasingly like, oh, this is celery? And if you harvest it in bunches as opposed to just the whole head, you can make it a little bit more profitable. So let's start at the seed starting process. Let's start with varieties. Try a couple different types. I like Tango a lot. It's a good beginner celery because it seems to do well in a wide range of situations. But I have had good experience with most of the types that we've tried, save for the pink celery, which I tried many years ago and didn't have a great success with. It never quite sized up as well as the other ones. But maybe that was just that specific event. I don't know. But my biggest tip here in terms of seed is don't mess around with the raw celery seed. It's the smallest seed known to gardeners, which may or may not be literal, but it certainly feels that way. Instead, seek out organically compliant pelleted seeds. You will not regret that. For starting celery, like I said, this is a super long season crop, so start it as early as you can. Just do so in the way that does not leave it vulnerable to heavy frosts or freezes. This crop loves to bolt in the spring if it feels like it went through an entire winter, so it is definitely one you do not want to put out in the garden before you are certain that you can protect it or that you are past that last chance of frost. We start celery seeds in roughly 1 by 1 inch blocks, or the 35 block standing blocker. We do not cover the seed at all, like with soil mix, because like we do the other seeds, because, and I hope you are ready to learn your new favorite term, celery seeds are considered positively photoblastic. meaning they need light to germinate, and it is said exactly like that, positively photoblastic, which, little known fact, that it's a scientific term that was coined in the late 60s by cartoon scientists. But essentially, when we seed celery, we do not stick it in a dark germ chamber or under other seed trays or whatever, because it needs light to do its thing, contrasted with negatively photoblastic seeds that don't need light and clearly need to be scalded to germinate. So our protocol is to set the seed in the dibbled hole and not cover it at all, and to keep it where it has access to light. We keep the trays at roughly 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, that's like 21 to 24 degrees Celsius, for roughly 2 to 3 weeks. It's okay if it dips below that temperature. Celery is like not very picky. It will still germinate. If it's colder, it will just take longer and it may germinate a little faster if it's a little warmer, but it has a huge germination window. It can germinate in fairly cold or fairly warm temperatures, but consistency is preferred. Then once it has germinated, it's just a matter of keeping the plant happy and healthy until it's time to put it in the ground. I will even pot them up lightly into small soil balls to give them a little extra room to grow. If they are growing too quickly or running out of fertility, like kind of yellowing or whatever, a little fish hydrolysate comes in handy with this crop in the greenhouse for how slow it can be. Basically, fertigate it every 10 days or so once it gets to like, I don't know, 3 or 4 leaves. In the third segment, we will talk about that planting part and also the harvesting part, and then also the storage part. But first, we're going to take a quick break to discuss gardenware, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Newsletters, right? A necessary evil for CSA farmers. Join Farmhand and real CSA farmers on April 11th for a free digital workshop where they'll share strategies they use to turn their newsletters into powerful sales tools. Get the secrets and go-to templates for success when you register for the free workshop today at farmhand.partners/newsletter. That's farmhand.partners/newsletter. And I'll put the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member TJ Tillman, who writes, quote, "Do you have any recommendations for overalls and boots for warm weather?" End quote. Okay, great question. Short and sweet. Love it. I'll answer this question, and I'll also go a little deeper into farmer workwear for the summer because I think it's a more interesting topic than maybe would normally get credit. Now, what I think is warm working conditions here in central Kentucky may not be to someone in a tropical region, or it may not be warm at all to them, or what someone in central Canada would consider a reasonable working temperature in the slightest. But I can speak generally about these things as it is a great topic, and again, the kind of topic that this show was created to be able to tackle, because I wouldn't be able to do just a normal Farmer Jesse video about something like this. First, I should say most growers in my area are not wearing overalls in the heat of the summer. It's just entirely too much clothing. Some light cotton or even maybe linen overalls could work, but for the most part, that's going to be a lot to deal with, unless, of course, you're going overalls, no shirt, in which case, salute. For most of the major work/farm brands, they do make some lighter weight overalls that could work if that's your thing. I even saw a pair that I have notably no experience with from one company that contains knee pads. As someone who almost exclusively plants and harvests from their knees, I like the idea of knee pads, but I find that either I cannot keep track of like the knee pad, the physical knee pads, they're often inserts, or the over the pants ones just start to rub a little bit too much and cause issues. For me, on the pants side of things, I generally prefer some light and lightly colored Goodwill sort of khakis that I can just beat to death. On a hot day, I will even roll them up, which makes me look super cool. I love to wear shorts as well, but I usually switch to those in the afternoon after harvest, so I'm not harvesting from bare knees. On the top, I like a t-shirt if it's not going to be too sunny, but I switch over to something lightly colored with long sleeves and a collar for the sunnier, hotter days. I'm kind of realizing that I do a lot of my workwear shopping at the job interview aisle of thrift stores, which I guess is kind of a weird form of upcycling, but I like giving outdated clothes a new life, and also I get to impress my wife with my fashion choices. The other thing I do, and I tried to explain this to a workwear company recently, is that I will buy reasonably nice clothes sometimes that I can wear out or wear to market, or they're just nice. And then over time, as those clothes become worn out, or less city wear, they become farm wear. So if you're designing farm wear, most farmers are not going to buy new clothes to directly work in. It needs to be nice to wear first, but functional as farm wear down the line. We need nice city clothes. That's like a thing that we need. Like going to market, it's nice to look like a farmer, but like a clean one. But we also need those city clothes to live out their later years as work clothes. So it's nice when they have that dual function. Anyway, the sleeves and the collar of a lightweight button-up may feel a little bit warmer, but the sun protection is critical. In drier places like California, a lot of workers will wear hoods as well as long sleeves. That is a bit harder to get away with here for the humidity. It just makes wearing any sort of hood feel like wearing a sort of greenhouse. So for us, for the head, it's all about the straw hat. Gotta get a good straw hat or two, preferably with an adjustable strap for below the chin so you don't have to spend all of your time chasing it for the wind. And as for footwear, I'm a clog person 100%, which is like 200% in Celsius, I think. I refuse to tie shoes unless I absolutely have to. I need to be able to slip them on and off as I come in and out of the house, which I have to do frequently throughout the day. And Crocs, which have annoyingly become popular and thus more expensive, are my favorite in terms of longevity. I've tried basically all the different types of clogs that are out there, and those are my favorite. Boots-wise, the summer is tough because rubber boots are just offensively hot. In the summer, if I have to wear boots, like I'm working in a pasture, or for those of you who perhaps live in areas with more populations of venomous snakes and that sort of stuff, a boot that I can slip on and off that is not just like black rubber on neoprene is my preference. I like the extra tough boots just generally as a brand. The quality is reasonably high and they make stuff for fishermen. So, it's functional for farmers in wetter climates or dewy areas. And that's not an advertisement nor previous sponsor. Just I like the product, especially if you will do a lot of like vegetable washing in the summer. It's good to have a pair of Grundens, like the waterproof overalls. It's not the worst idea. I also, notably not a sponsor, but that's pretty standard across the board. Most farmers have some Grundens. Only other workwear essentials I have for the summer is to protect my eyes with sunglasses and also my hearing with some sort of, earmuffs or whatever you'd call the sort of noise canceling headphones. If you're doing tractor work especially, or mowing or weed whacking or whatever, you don't want to spend the last 30 years of your life being like, what? Because I fear that's where I'm going because I've seen it happen. So you want to avoid that if you can help it. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Otherwise, let's take a quick break. And when we return, we will return to our celery. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. All right, so back to our celery. You can plant celery when it's short or when it's tall. It doesn't totally matter necessarily, though you may as well take as much advantage of the warm climate of your greenhouse as you can to get past those last cold days and skip any chance of bolting. I prefer to have the celery a few inches tall before planting, but don't fret it if it's taller or shorter or whatever. For bed prep, think fertile, like really fertile. This is a crop that prefers really rich soil, loose, well-draining for good production. So a good nutritional compost is a must, and possibly some fertigation, so fish hydrolysate en route to harvest. For spacing, I like 12 to 14 inches apart, so that's like 30 to 35 centimeters, give or take, with 3 rows on a 48-inch bed or 2 rows on a 30-inch bed. They like a decent amount of space between plants because they are both heavy feeders and heavy drinkers of water, and that way irrigation is essential. I think it's a bit misunderstood as a crop that likes water so much it will do well in poorly draining plots, and that's not necessarily the case. It likes water and fertility, but also air and mobility to put its roots down. It's quite demanding as a crop. Mulch can help a whole lot in the moisture department and may even provide a little blanch to the celery if you have it kind of up against the plant, or you can hill it up a bit and give it that slight blanching effect. I don't go bananas on the blanching stuff, but you definitely could, and certainly people do. To me, it's just not a total necessity, but for some customers may prefer it that way. If you want any profit at all from the stuff, though, you should try to find ways to reduce the workload, and doing individual branches probably ain't it. I do find celery, once they are established, to be a decent intercrop for lettuce because that space in the middle allows for decent lettuce growth and better use of space. But you just don't want to challenge the celery too early, too much, and you would really want to ensure those beds get adequate water. And again, fertility. Intercrops could, at least in theory, also help not only with the profitability of those beds, but with the blanching if timed well. Now, similar to onions and trimming, it is sometimes recommended to trim celery at planting to increase uniformity, but the reality, according to the research I could find, is that trimming them before transplanting may help a bit with uniformity and make it easier to plant, but won't necessarily increase the yield. Nor will drying the roots, which is, or at least was, another common practice. So just plant it like straight from the soil block or cell tray or whatever in most cases. Make sure it's nice and moist. Maybe even apply some compost directly to the planting hole, directly to the place where you're going to be planting it. No need to mess with it too much. Now, again, this crop will take a millennia to be ready to harvest, and you can harvest it whenever you want to. Really, you could harvest it young if you wanted. And you can do that in one of two ways: harvesting the whole bunch at ground level, or by harvesting individual stalks into bunches. Now, the stalks into bunches take some hand selling because people are not always certain what they are looking at when it's in bunches of celery, but just taking the stalks will improve the profitability considerably. Then you can harvest it until the fall from the outside. Then in the fall, cut the whole bunch, trim off the outside, and sell the entire bunch that way after a couple of months of harvesting. We used to grow it for our CSA at roughly 12 inches apart, so like 30 centimeters, to get slightly smaller and also slightly faster celery, but later switched to harvesting bunches, like just pulling off the individual stalks and doing bunches, leaving it to just continue regrowing, sort of, I don't know, like you would a kale plant or a chard plant or whatever. Then get it cooled down rapidly after harvest to avoid excessive oxidation or wilting. And on harvest day, harvest celery stalks after the tender greens like you would, again, kale, chard, that stuff, all at the same time. Bunches, you would have a little more wiggle room on what time of day you're harvesting. Interestingly, the old timers used to harvest celery whole roots, like roots and all, and then store those in the celery, and they'd last for many months that way. So there's a world where celery is actually a really good storage crop if you have a good cellar. Anyway, I think that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap it up there. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook of the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Darlene Parker Kozak. Awesome. And Dan Gorman. So today, this is the story of a couple of musicians out of Central Illinois who were on a train one day headed west, and a man stopped them and stopped by their seats, stopped them in mid-conversation and handed them a piece of sheet music. You could tell they were musicians, thought they might like it. However, he said it was powerful, so to be careful with it. So the two musicians laughed, but later that day they were at a train station in Omaha waiting for the connecting train to take them south, and they decided to play the tune that the old man had given them. Suddenly, everyone in the train station fell down and fell asleep as soon as the music ended. Just out cold. The two musicians couldn't revive them, but after about, 5 minutes, everyone woke up and just sort of carried on with their business. And they immediately realized, the two musicians did, that after a few more trials in some other public spaces, because, you got to trial it, make sure it's actually not an anomaly, what they'd stumbled upon was indeed powerful and could be used for good or bad. And that's where our story begins. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you for Thursday. Not gonna, still doesn't work really. All right, bye.